Why, hello there, Internet. I have told YouTube to go live, so hopefully we're going live. But if we're not live, I'll give it a few minutes to catch up while I watch my laptop here on the side and make sure it's happening. This is an encoder thing, by the way. That's a tomorrow conversation. But it does look like I am, in fact, quite live. So hey, welcome back to the epic video editing cave, I guess. It's my office in my apartment, and my audio is coming out of my phone, but that does confirm that we are, in fact, live. It's so great to see you. Welcome back. I'm thrilled that you are here to continue investing in your craft. A quick overview of what we're doing this week. We're talking live streaming every day this week, and as we learned previously, there are 5 components to a live streaming system, and there are 5 days in the week. So that works out well for us because, well, I can talk about one of them each day this week, rather than having to try and cover everything in one big, long live stream, and that works out great. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Josh Hughes. I run this channel as part of my company, Epic Video, and the whole purpose here is we're helping you save time, cash, and sanity while we're all pursuing the next level of video for our nonprofits, churches, etc., small businesses, cause-based organizations. And the way I do that is by giving out information, bringing you behind the scenes, all those kinds of things. So if you want to stick around, we'd love to have you subscribe. I'm putting out lots of regular content, although during the quarantine, I've sort of moved over to producing live things because the volume of work that I am editing remotely is so high that I'm running out of time to also edit videos for YouTube. So to get around that, we're using this lovely live streaming setup, and I get to talk to you about live streaming while live streaming, which is pretty exciting and a little bit meta. So just a quick overview of a live streaming system. Like I said, there are 5 key components. There are your inputs, the cameras, the microphones, the lights, the things that we want to broadcast to the world. Then those inputs go to a switcher, which is what we're talking about today, so we'll get to more on that. From the switcher, we send a program feed to our encoder, and the encoder is responsible for sending that up to the internet, basically turning it into something we can redistribute. The next step in the process is a distribution platform, and that is some service somewhere on the internet that is responsible for taking your live stream and sending it to people. And then the last piece of the puzzle is the endpoints. Someone is watching your live stream. For example, my phone has the live feed on it right there from today. This is an endpoint. So we need to factor those into our decision making. Even though we can't control what people use to watch our live streams, we can cater to what they've decided, making sure that we're formatting, if it's on a phone, we want to make sure we format the right way versus a desktop or a TV, whatever else. So those are all the pieces. Now, I know what you're feeling, because lots of people are feeling it right now. Since the quarantine, lots of organizations and nonprofits have been sort of forced into the live streaming arena, and they don't feel ready. They're overwhelmed. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. There's so much to learn, so many pieces. Maybe you're nervous about the money, right? Giving is way down right now because people are worried about, are we going to find enough toilet paper this week? So the generosity of people in general has kind of taken a step down. So we're worried about different budget tiers. And you might even be on the outside looking in thinking, I'm not even a really techie person. Like, my nonprofit is about feeding the homeless, not knowing everything there is to know about IT. And I want you to know right from the beginning that those are not obstacles to you getting into using video to connect with your tribe. In fact, they might be really good reasons for you to use video to connect with your tribe. Nothing mobilizes people as effectively as just having a sit-down conversation with you. And so the idea of a live stream where it's just, hey, I'm in a room, I can see your comments and respond if you have something to say to me, that whole premise, that feels very authentic and genuine as opposed to the high-produced videos. So getting to know all this stuff is probably a good idea for you to branch into, especially now where we're all social distancing. And that's why I've made it a priority to get lots and lots of resources in front of you to help you navigate that world. So if that's you, I see you, I understand you, and I'm on your team, and we're going to figure this out. Yesterday, we covered inputs really in depth, so feel free to go back and watch that. But today, I'm going to focus on switchers. Now, the purpose of a switcher is twofold. First, it's going to collect all of your inputs and put them in one place so that we can do stuff with them. So let's say you've got 4 cameras, or you've got 2 cameras and a computer desktop, or you've got different microphones, things like that in the room. Your switcher is where all those things will plug into. It's the one box, the one box to rule them all. It's the device that will take all of that and combine it. And then the second function of a switcher is to generate what we call the program feed or the broadcast feed. And this is when you combine all those things together and you decide, right now we want to see this thing, And for example, now I want to see a different thing, and you switch between, that's done by your switcher, and then it chops all that together into one video feed, which we can send to the internet that has all the different pieces in it. So the switcher takes our inputs, puts them in one place, and then it generates a broadcast feed that we can encode and send to the internet. That's all it does. It doesn't need to be super scary. They can do lots more, but they don't need to. At its core, that's what a switcher is. So let's dive into the ways that these can work for us. Now, there are software and hardware options, and what that basically means is there are versions like software that go into a computer, like my laptop is currently running the switcher we're using right now. And that's really convenient because you already probably have a computer, so you don't need to buy any extra hardware or anything like that. You just put the software on your computer and you're pretty much ready to go. There are also hardware switchers, which is an actual box that you buy and you sit that somewhere and it does the thing. And those are specifically designed for live streaming. So the downside of using your laptop is that your laptop is built to do a whole bunch of things, which is great, but it doesn't necessarily do any of them perfectly. Computers can be really finicky. If you've ever had a Zoom call where you can't hear the audio on the other end and no one can figure out why, that's a great example of those kinds of issues. But sitting in the space where you have a device that's just built to do live streaming well, it's going to be a lot easier to set up and make it all go because that device is built for that thing. It doesn't have to worry about, okay, but what if they want to open a Word document? It doesn't have those issues. So that's the real benefit of a hardware switcher. They're very reliable and very volunteer friendly. Once you get to know the pieces, it's going to be the same every time. Whereas with a computer, there are always the occasions where it's like, oh man, I need to reboot, and nobody knows why. We're just doing it because the computer was having a bad day and decided it hated us this morning. I'm sure you've never experienced anything like that. But they both have their pros and cons, like I said. One thing to keep in mind with computers is that you may need to use a capture card. A capture card is an intermediate step between the camera and the computer because your computer usually isn't built to receive HDMI feeds. Yesterday we talked about how our cameras can output clean HDMI feeds or SDI feeds. So that's some cable, an HDMI cable or an SDI cable, and on that cable we're sending a video signal. But your computer may not have the ports necessary to actually plug that in. Like I've got a USB plugged into the side of my computer here, but it doesn't have an HDMI port that would take an incoming signal. They're not bidirectional. So we need to put some device in the middle that captures our video signal and puts that into the computer so that we can use it with our switching software. And I've got a couple example of those just to walk you through, what they look like. This is the one that I'm actually using right now. And it's available at your local Best Buy, although you'll notice my company has cleaned out basically all of the ones near us. So that's something because we support so many churches and stuff that we wanted to have a stock of them to give out to people to borrow. But this is a $200 device that basically has on one end, you've got, if they have a picture of that end, right here. So there's an HDMI input, and here's a little microphone input, and then there's a USB. And the USB plug goes into my computer, and then it sees that as, oh, there's a video input. So then in my switcher, I can work with that input the same way you'd work with anything else. Now, a hardware switcher, right, let's get out of this view really quick. A hardware switcher is going to have all the inputs you need on the back of it, probably. So you're not as likely to need a capture card for that device. I do want to show you a couple other options for, well, just one more really, options for capturing devices. This is by Blackmagic Design, who are a very reliable company when it comes to broadcast equipment. They're an established name, and they're not super duper expensive. And they have a product called the Web Presenter, which is $500, but it will take 2 inputs. Now this is not one of its marketed abilities, but it's a very big ability that I always see people using and getting a lot of ground out of. For $500 with this device, you can plug in 2 cameras and switch between them. Now, of course, it has a SDI and an HDMI input, so you would need to have one of each type. But this means that it can technically be your switcher as well as your capture card. Your computer sees it as a webcam, so if you can switch between the 2 devices without needing to install a new software on your computer, then that eliminates a step of complexity, which is really convenient. So that's the Web Presenter, and this is another USB connected device. And they also make capture cards that go inside your computer. So if you are a more techie consumer and you build PCs or you know how to take yours apart and modify it, things like that, you can get a card like this for $150 and just install it into your computer, and then your computer will have those ports built in just like a switcher would. So those are some examples of capture cards and how you would use them. Now let's talk about the software switching solutions, right? There are a bunch of different softwares out there that all compete with each other, and I'll be honest with you, they really all do the same stuff with different packaging on them. When you're deciding between software switchers, you're really deciding between the user experience, which one looks like the way you think. So I'm going to do these in order of cost, but I'm going to save the free option for last because the free option's my favorite, and you should always save the best for last, right? So the first one of these is a software called vMix, and they have a pretty clunky looking website, but you can get an idea from this image at the top here that basically all of your inputs connect into this software, and then you can choose between them which one goes live at any given time, and then it's live. And this software is a subscription tiered software, I think. Let me check that before I say it for sure. Let's see, buy now. I'm just gonna make sure how much you need to do here. Nope, sorry. It's a single purchase that does not expire, and you get updates for a whole year. Now you can buy it for as cheap as $60. There is a free version. The free version is not going to be worth your time. The free version doesn't even output in standard definition. So we're going to just ignore that for now and come over here to the basic HD tier. So for $60, you're getting a software that will take 4 different inputs, and 3 of those can be a camera, and then mix those together and generate a program feed for you. We're not going to talk so much about what it's outputting because that's for the encoding stage. And a lot of software switchers have encoders built into them, so that's another advantage. So they're your cheap option here, $60. They're not a particularly great user experience. In my opinion, they're a little clunky, but they are cheap, and sometimes that's worth it. Now, if we start upgrading to higher level stuff here, we're looking at, this is Vimeo's software. It's called Livestream Studio 6, and it will integrate with several social media platforms, including Vimeo. And the benefit of that is that you don't have to worry about RTMP and some other encoding solutions. On the surface, it does exactly what the other one does. So if you look right here, you'll see all your inputs are in a line across the middle. We've got something to preview what we're looking at and something to post what we're looking at, and then all of our audio is on the bottom. So again, you're seeing this is a pretty similar software. The purchase price for this software is actually built into a Vimeo subscription. So if your organization, a lot of churches use Vimeo to archive all their sermons anyway, then you actually have this software already. So that's nice. It's free for all Livestream and Vimeo Premium subscribers. That is the only way to get that software. So if you're looking for a software solution and you don't want to use Vimeo, then this is not the route I would recommend, because you need to subscribe to Vimeo Pro to get it, and it's just not going to be worth it to just get the software. Now, another option that's out there is called Wirecast. Wirecast is $600. It's very reliable, and it will, again, do what all the other ones do. And it's a one-time purchase that you own for life, although you'll need to pay for upgrades in the future if they release, like if they're on version 6 and they come out with version 7, you have to buy version 7. It's not like they'll upgrade you for free. And Wirecast also has a built-in encoder. So again, you're seeing these all do mostly the same things, but they look drastically different, right? The way Wirecast is laid out versus the way Livestream Studio is laid out versus the way I wanted to show you how this one was laid out, but I had scrolled too far down the page. So, technical hold. There we go. So the way this one's laid out versus the way this one's laid out are very different. And then those are different from the way that vMix is laid out. They all just look and feel a little differently from each other. Now there's also the free kit on the block. This is called OBS. It is free and open source, and it's very easy to use. I'm using it right now. And there's a picture here in the center of the screen of what your OBS looks like. And just like the others, you have sources, which are that second tab in from the left. You've got scenes, which are how you arrange your different looks. And then you've got an audio mixer. Very easy, very straightforward. This is a pretty easy program to teach your volunteers to use as well. So I really, if you're going to go with a software solution, I recommend OBS. There's no reason to pay for the other things when OBS does everything they do for free, reliably. That's just my opinion. If the other ones look more like you think, then there can definitely be value in purchasing a software that works for the way your brain works. But for me, this is the way to go. Okay, let's talk about some of the negatives of using a software solution really quick. One of them is that your multi-view can be really hard to see. Now, what is a multi-view? Actually, let me pull this back up because one of them had a photo of it. So this on the right, this right side computer monitor, that's a multi-view. It's basically a grid where you see all the different inputs coming into your switcher so that you can at a glance know what they see before you put them live. And it's really crucial to have one of these when you get above 1 or 2 cameras, because it's hard to remember what everything sees at any given time. So having that available in an easy to see way is a big deal. When you're using a computer, you're confined to the space of your computer monitor for not just the multi-view, but also the actual switcher, right? To look at your audio levels and what video is live and all that kind of thing. Now, these people have gone around it by using 2 computer monitors, and that's a fine solution. But if you don't have 2 computer monitors, or you don't want to spend the extra $300 on a decent computer monitor, then and some of them go up to, $700 or $800, then you probably aren't going to want to go this route. Now, you can use a TV with a hardware switcher, and that's really convenient because it's gigantic. But on a computer, you're limited to what the computer can do. So that's a potential negative. There's the negative of needing a capture card for every input. And also, you're limited by how many USB ports your computer has. If your computer's only got 2 USB ports on it, which is pretty common right now, then you would need to buy like a USB dock and then plug all your capture cards into that to get all your different inputs and things, and that can be frustrating. There's the negative that you can't operate it without looking. It's not as tactile as a production switcher would be. And what I mean by that is if I've got a series of buttons, just like typing on the computer keyboard, you can memorize where they are under your fingers and then not have to look down to find the right button to hit. But when you're on a computer, because you're using a mouse, I always have to glance over here, even in the middle of my stream where I should be talking to you. I have to glance over here and look at the mouse to see what I'm clicking in order to change the scene. That can be frustrating if you're going to be a solo operation, which many of us are. So those are some things to think about as potential cons of software switcher solutions. Now, I also want to take a second for each of these, for software and for hardware, I'll do this, and go over the things they're going to try and sell you on. There are a lot of technical buzzwords that get associated with programs like this, and so I just want to run you through the list of what they are, and maybe afterwards I'll even drop some of these in the comments or something. But basically, they're going to tell you, oh, it does this thing, and it may mean nothing to you because the words are so technical or there are so many acronyms. So I actually went through these product pages earlier today and wrote down some of the terms that I thought you might not understand. No offense, but just to make sure that we've covered all of the materials. This is especially for those overwhelmed people out there. This is, I got you. I'm looking right at you right now. I mean, I'm looking at my notes, but I'm also looking at you. So the first thing is they're going to talk about the resolution of their program feed, and it's going to be some ridiculous number. So like it could be 1920 by 1080, or it could be 3840 by 2160, or something like that. You're going to see some number like that. They also might say this is HD, or full HD, or ultra HD, or DCI ultra HD. Like there's all these different ways to talk about resolution. What that really means is how big is the picture that you're creating. The bigger the resolution is, the more detail you can cram inside of it. So a 1920 by 1080 image, which is also called full HD, is smaller than a 3140 by 2160 or something like that. 3840 maybe, I don't know. But Ultra HD is the next one bigger, and then DCI Ultra HD is bigger than that. Those different sizes tell you how big of a picture you can make. But if you remember from yesterday, we talked about you're also being limited by your internet connection. And tomorrow we'll get into more details of what that actually means. But you probably will not be broadcasting at 4K. You won't be broadcasting those really big pictures because it takes a really fast internet speed to send that many pictures up up to the internet that fast. So I would expect that you'll be streaming in 1920 by 1080, which is also called full HD. So if you're looking at resolutions, that is the only criteria that it needs to meet. Another one of the words they'll use is they'll talk about integrations, or RTMP. This is how the encoding side of your switcher will work. So again, the software switchers have a lot of encoding built into them. And integration means that you will put in your login and password for a social media website or a distribution platform like Vimeo, and then it will handle getting the video to that person. RTMP is, again, we said this isn't what it stands for, but it's how you can remember it. RTMP looks like route map. This is the route that your stream takes to get somewhere. So when you're looking at RTMP, it means you can stream anywhere. Every streaming destination will give you RTMP addresses. So they're very easy to use and they're very flexible. So if you only get integrations, then you probably want to look elsewhere, in my opinion, because I would always rather stream over RTMP. Now, another one of our things that you'll hear is hardware acceleration. That sounds space age and futuristic and great, and honestly is not super big of a deal. Hardware acceleration means that if your computer has a separate graphics processing unit in it, which is called a GPU, then the switching software will take advantage of that in order to save your computer some effort. It basically makes the workload easier for your computer. If your computer is your standard run-of-the-mill, Dell or HP or whatever from Walmart or Best Buy, then it may not have a GPU in it, in which case hardware acceleration means nothing to you. And it will work, again, it'll work fine without hardware acceleration. This is just one of the things that can make things easier on your computer when you get up to 12 cameras, and that's a lot of pictures for it to process at a time. I don't expect most of our nonprofit or church friends will be using 12 cameras at the price points we're talking about. So I don't know that you need to be worried about it. So that's another buzzword we're going to cross off the list, right? We don't need to worry about hardware acceleration. To recap, so far we've said resolutions, we only need to be sure that it will do full HD or 1080p. That's the resolution that we care about. We've talked about integrations and RTMP. And we've said that integrations are nice, but RTMP is the one that we need. We need to know for sure that our solution will use RTMP. Then we've talked about hardware acceleration, which we really don't need to worry about at this point. Another thing that they may offer you is remote control over the internet. In some cases, that might be useful, and in some cases, it wouldn't be. And that's really a use case thing, so I'm not going to tell you to ignore that. But some softwares, like Wirecast, will let you sign in. So I could sign in here, but manage your stream in Texas, and it would let me control the switcher software. In my opinion, that's not super useful because I mostly want to be in the room where the stream is happening in order to make sure I see what's happening and switch in time. If there's any kind of lag or delay, or if my video feed gets interrupted, all of a sudden I'm flying blind as a remote operator. But for some use cases, that might be really valuable. For example, right now we're social distancing and we're not supposed to go over to each other's houses. So that could be a great way to get around that problem. And so there are uses for it. You just need to decide if it's something that really matters to you. It is still kind of a marketing hypey term, so don't let that be the thing that wins you over. You might also hear about tally lights. Tally lights are the little red light on the front of a camera that tells you when that camera is live. Your switcher is responsible for telling your camera, hey, you're live, turn on the little red light. And that's what a tally light integration is. So your camera needs tally lights and your switcher needs to be able to control tally lights for that to work. So if you see tally light integration, that doesn't automatically mean that your camera will have a big red light on the front of it. Now, yesterday we talked about a whole bunch of different cameras. The only one of those that comes with a tally light is the production level studio cameras. So if you're using anything else like a hybrid mirrorless camera or a GoPro or a camcorder, any of those things, they don't have tally lights built in. So this is not a term that you need to worry about when you're looking for a switching solution. Another term you might hear is NDI. NDI is a relatively new invention. It is the technology that lets you send video over the local area network. Basically, that computer's signal to my computer over the internet. I wouldn't need a capture card. It's not like it's nothing, but I don't think it's the thing that should decide what you purchase for. The things that we care about the most, that's all the terms for software switchers. But the thing that we care about the most is we want to know it does RTMP. We want to know it can do a 1080p or full HD stream. And that's it. So don't let any of the other buzzwords pull you in or push you away from making a purchase. Whew, that was a lot, right? Are you feeling overwhelmed? I'm a little overwhelmed. In fact, I'm so overwhelmed that I'm going to take a second, compose myself, and take a breath. It's a lot different talking to a camera when it's always rolling than it is when you're pre-recording. And that's something that I'm still, like, I can teach you how to do it, but I'm still getting used to doing it myself. So I apologize if I'm a little stumbly over the words. I'm also highly caffeinated right now. That might have something to do with it. But, you know, working from home, you got to do something to kick yourself into action, right? And for me, that's caffeine. Okay, moving on to hardware switchers. So on the hardware side, obviously nothing's going to be free, right? Someone had to build this thing, so you're going to have to pay something for it. But there are some low-cost options. Things to think about with hardware switchers: you don't need to worry about capture cards almost always. There are 2 exceptions, and I'll get to those. But for the most part, the back of your switcher will have a bunch of different plugs on it that are shaped like what comes out of your camera. So you just plug your camera right into the switcher and move on with your life. Now, the exception is you may need a capture card if you're using a computer as your encoder. So like I said with that capture card we talked about before, the Blackmagic Web Presenter, if your computer is responsible for taking your video feed and actually sending it to the internet, then you still need to get that program feed, the finished video, into your computer. And that's where you may end up needing a capture card in order to get the video that comes out of the switcher to connect to your computer. It's not always the case, and there are some switchers that have USB connections, but it is sometimes the case. The other thing to be, like the other caveat, I guess, to the capture card thing, is that if your switcher has the wrong plugs on the back of it for the cameras that you have, then you might need what's called a cross converter and a scaler. These are devices that, just like a USB capture card that works with a computer, they take one plug on one side and a different plug comes out the other side. And their job is to make it so that no matter what camera you're using, it plays nicely with your switcher. There are some really cheap options, and there are some really expensive options, and you basically get what you pay for when it comes to cross converters and scalers. I'm not going to dive into them too much today because we are buying our system from scratch this week, right? So we're going to talk about things as if we were buying them all to work with each other. But if you need them, I will tell you that the product I always recommend is the Decimator MD HX. And that's all we're going to say about it for now because I don't want to get too far off topic. Maybe in the future I'll do a review of one of those just so you can see them. By the way, I'm not sponsored by any of these brands. I guess I should have said that yesterday too. Nobody is paying me money to talk about their products. I just think that these will be helpful for you as you dive into the live stream, world. So I'm not making any money from these people. I just have used a lot of their tools and I have a lot of really strong opinions. And because I'm caffeinated, I just can't hold them back. So, great. So there are 3 major brands in the world of hardware switchers. There's Blackmagic Design, there's Roland, and there's NewTek. We are going to focus exclusively on Blackmagic Design today, not because I am sponsored, but because after using all of those people's products, I know for sure that you're going to pick Blackmagic. They have the easiest user interface, so you can train a volunteer or figure it out yourself even if you're not a super techie person. They are the lowest cost, and they are still reliable and believable, and they'll run for years even though they're lower cost. And lastly, they're really common in churches and nonprofits. So your neighbors probably have one, that church down the road or whatever. There are lots of tutorials, forums, whatever online. If you have an issue, your question's probably been asked and answered already. And lastly, their support team is literally incredible. It's so much fun getting to talk to them. You can tell that they're really passionate about their products and that they care about the user experience. So those are a bunch of reasons to go with Blackmagic Design. And they didn't even have to pay me to get me to say that, which is almost a shame because I'd love to make some money someday. Wow, I said that like I'm broke. I'm not broke, but I am quarantined. So let's talk about the Blackmagic family of products. I'm gonna come over here to the old B&H photo video, and let's talk about this little guy first. This product was announced like days ago. It is so brand new that it hasn't even come into stock at this store yet. And I know for sure that they're not lying about that because I've called them every day since it was announced to see if they have it yet. It is a $600 video switcher that on the back is all HDMI inputs. So, wow, that didn't get any bigger. There we go. So you can see we've got 4 HDMI inputs. We've got an HDMI output, which you could plug into a TV or something to look at your multi-view, or you can use it to preview, like you can see a version of what your program feed looks like. So those are 2 options. You can plug in 2 microphones to it. So if you're doing a podcast with someone else, you can both be wearing a lapel mic or something like that. We talked about those yesterday. And then it's got this USB out where it connects to your laptop. And the USB out will get seen as a webcam. So you can do all the work of switching between cameras using these buttons on the front. You can see the 1, 2, 3, 4 at the bottom. That will choose whether you're seeing camera 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then on the right, you have some buttons to control how you switch between them. We won't even dive into those right now. It's not worth getting into, but they're all just tools for how you use it. At its core, there are 4 buttons, and they tell you what camera is live and when. That gets seen as a webcam, so it sees your program feed, one stream of video, even though you can change which camera is live. And then that webcam, you can just go to YouTube or Facebook or wherever and say, stream from my webcam. And there it is. You're live, you're using a switcher, and that's super simple and easy to do. This is my favorite product on the market for small organizations right now, or for people who live streaming is not a super huge priority, or for people who need to be portable. This thing is powered over USB. So it's like one little box like this that you carry with you, and then you plug it into the USB and you move on with your life. Super reliable, and I love it. I can't wait for them to release this so I can get one and try it out and make tutorials and all the great things. But maybe that's not enough for you. Maybe you need more cameras, or if you're a church and you're looking to live stream your church services, maybe you need... I'm going to back up from that. With this one of the other major benefits is they have what's called an HDMI pass-through on the HDMI out. So it is possible for you to plug something into the first HDMI port and get an exact duplicate of it through your HDMI out port. The reason this matters is that if you want to stream something that is happening in real time that you are controlling, I'm looking at you video game streamers, this device will let you use it as if there was no switcher in the way. There's no lag or latency between the Xbox, for example, and the TV. So you can plug it into this box, the switcher here. You plug your Xbox into the switcher, you plug HDMI out into your TV. You're still seeing it as though there was no device adding any delay when you're looking at the TV, but then you also have the ability to overlay other cameras and things like that. So this is a great product for video game streamers or for organizations who have, if you've got a live poll where people's results are being displayed and you want to see them in real time without any delay at all, that's another way to do it. Or if you've got a countdown or something like that. So that's one way that this device really excels. Moving on to a little bit more expensive option. And this, I know, just like multiplied in the expanse of intensity. What we're looking at here is a $3,000 television switcher from, it's the ATEM Television Studio Pro is the device name here. This is for operations that need a little bit more power than what 4 HDMI buttons will give you. So if we look at the back of this device, now we're looking at SDI ports here instead of HDMI ports. And HDMI is only good for 50 feet. After 50 feet, you start to lose quality. So SDI is a lot better for churches or organizations with an auditorium or portable setups that are doing like a conference or a keynote speech, something like that, where you need to set up really long runs to get to the camera. You're going to want to use SDI cable. And that's where we get into the more expensive family of switchers like this one. This also is superior to the other switcher because it's a lot more powerful internally. This one will let you overlay graphics onto what you're doing, and it'll let you, chroma key out backgrounds and all sorts of stuff. It's also got this bar that's at the bottom with the white lines. Hang on, I'll point on my camera. It's like right over from my finger right now. That thing is a crossfader bar, so you can literally manually fade from one source to the other to decide how fast you want it to fade. Or you can hit the transition button and it'll auto fade between them, or you can cut from one to the other, whereas the smaller devices like the ATEM Mini Pro just have an auto fade or a cut. You can't do anything else really with those. So that's one of the reasons this is great. It's also got a little screen up there at the top where you can watch your program feed or you can monitor any one input. So you could hypothetically get away without a multi-view, although you shouldn't. You should never not. Wait. I need you here. Don't ever stream without a multi-view. It is so crucial to see what everything is doing at once. Now, maybe for a setup like what I'm doing right now, the multi-view might be overkill. I've got one camera and I'm alternating between using just the camera and my desktop. But if you are a church or if you are an organization with more than one camera angle, for any reason, you should have a multi-view so that you can see what all those cameras see at any one time. There is nothing worse than accidentally cutting to a black screen or cutting to a shot of maybe a compromising angle of somebody where it's like you're looking right up the speaker's nose because the camera's too close. Or, if someone turns around or bends over the wrong way or something like that, that is going to immediately distract your viewers and disengage them from the content. And the multi-view is essential for being able to prevent those easily preventable mix-ups. Okay, back to what we were talking about here. So this is sort of the mid-tier device, and it's $3,000. It's really reliable. It'll run for years and years. It's got lots of control in it. You can even color correct some of your cameras from within this device. So like it'll tell them, hey, that's too blue, make it less blue, rather than all your operators having to know what they're doing. So using hardware switchers for that reason makes them really useful for if you've got one person on staff who knows what's going on, and then volunteers who are willing but maybe don't have all the training. This way you can, your one staff person from the switcher has all the control, and then your volunteers who maybe have only had a little bit of training can just worry about like, okay, I just need to point this camera at the action and trust that it's going to look good. And that's a nice benefit of those as well. Now, we eventually get into even bigger equipment like this guy. Sorry, the caffeine's clearly wearing off. This is the ATEM 2 ME Production Studio 4K. That's a lot of letters and abbreviations and acronyms. Don't worry too much about it. It's a $4,000 device, and it will do just about everything. Let's bring this up and look a little more closely. It's got one HDMI input on it, so if you needed a laptop or, your slideshow or something like that, you can always plug that in. It's got plenty of SDI ports. I think there's 16 inputs. It's got 6 aux outputs, which we'll come back to in a second, and it's got a bunch of program and multi-view outs and all those kinds of things. The aux outputs are outputs that are not your program feed. So, for example, churches will use aux outputs. So if I connect my switcher to my live stream, to my projector, and to my lobby, then I could use the aux outputs so that I'm only ever showing the slides on my screen in the auditorium, but an aux output that goes to the lobby is showing only the feed of the pastor talking, because you can always walk in and see the slides, and my program feed, which is the one that the operator is cutting back and forth and changing things, is going to an encoder so that people who are online can see the live stream. So that's an example of using aux outputs. They're not necessary for everybody, but they can be, especially for big installations or places with a lot of different endpoints. I'm doing an install right now at one church in Westminster that has like 20 endpoints or something throughout the building, and they want to be able to show something different on each of them. And to be able to do that, we needed a whole lot of aux outs. So those are your aux outs. Now let's go over the buzzwords for hardware switchers. Right, there's a whole family of Blackmagic Design switchers, which, I can show you really quick here. Blackmagic Design switchers. Bam. So there's all these different options, and it's loading all the different choices, and they come in at all the different prices. And rather than going through them all one by one, I have shown you my favorites. I recommend this one, the ATEM Mini Pro, for small organizations, portable organizations, and basically anyone with a face who doesn't need to install their switcher into like an auditorium or a building. This is what I recommend. But how can you decide between all the options if this isn't right for you? Or how can you check that this will do everything you need it to do? Well, let's decode some of the obnoxious marketing words that they're going to use on you. The first thing you'll hear about is when it comes to SDI cable. Now remember, that's a type of connection between your camera and the switcher, SDI, and it can go for really long runs. So SDI is always better than HDMI. If you have the option, you should use SDI sources. But you will see it broken into categories: 3G, 6G, and 12G. And those are, they have technical specifications and meanings, but really all they mean is Full HD, Ultra HD, DCI Ultra HD, which remember we talked about, we only care about Full HD. That's a 3G SDI cable. 6G and 12G can do bigger, but because they can do bigger stuff, they can also do a 1080p Full HD video feed. So we don't care about 3G, 6G, 12G. 3G is plenty. So as long as it has SDI ports on it, you should be good to go. The next term you'll see is Genlock. And that's also a show that I love watching, but this is not the time for that. Genlock, as it relates to video sources, a switcher that has Genlock is a switcher that will synchronize everything that comes in back to the same point in time. So your camera has to process the image and then send it down the line to the switcher. And different cameras, especially if you've got a couple entry-level ones and then you bought a really good one, will take different amounts of time to process those pictures. So if I set up 5 cameras in the room and I snap my fingers, the more expensive and better ones are going to get the snap almost in real time, where I snap my finger and it basically happens on the camera. But the other ones might take a half second longer to process the image before they send it down to the switcher. Genlock lets the switcher take all those feeds and it handles aligning them. If you don't have Genlock, it's not really the end of the world, especially for a 1 or a 2 camera setup. Genlock really matters if you've got multiple angles of the same thing that are going to be shown at the same time. And since that's really not a common issue for us, I would not concern yourself with it. If you were a gamer, maybe, because we're seeing you move the controller and we're seeing the video game react. So there's the potential for Genlock to matter, but again, I'm going to strike that off the list of things we care about, because it's just not, in the grand scheme of things, a couple milliseconds is not going to ruin your viewer's experience. So we've talked about 6G, 12G, and 3G SDI. We've said we don't care. We've looked at Genlock. We've said we don't care. Another thing you might see is called SMPTE timecode, SMPTE. And that is, again, something we don't care about. Timecode is how you automate stuff. So SMPTE is that's an acronym for something, 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 fancy technology timecode. Basically, you plug a SMPTE generator into all of your different production equipment pieces, and then it has a clock on it. Now you can program into your other devices, hey, when the clock reaches 1, I want the light to be blue, I want the switcher to change to camera 2, and I want the slide to say these words. We are not on that level, and we don't need to be on that level. If you are a church that needs to be on that level, call my company and we'll get you set up with the good stuff. This is not, we're not talking about that level when we're talking about breaking into the live streaming world. So SMPTE timecode, we're going to also ignore. You may see an RU designation, like this device is 2RU big. The RU stands for rack units, so that's if you're going to mount it into a rack. This is how many spaces it takes up in the rack. If you are not mounting your unit in a rack, it doesn't matter. If you are mounting it in a rack, you probably already knew that, but I just wanted to cover, if you see that, it's just a designation for size as it pertains to mounting it into a server rack. It's not a huge deal. Man, I'm frustrated by the quarantine because I can't have this equipment to hold up and show you, and we have access to it. But moving on. So far, we've said that none of the words you're going to hear you're going to care about. You'll see program outs and aux outs. That is the number of independent program outputs and aux outputs. So every program output gets a copy of exactly what you switch on the switcher. But your aux outs can have anything routed to them. So they can be additional program outputs, but they could also be your multi-viewer, or they could be just the slides computer, or they could be just the first camera is always going out there. That could be useful for if you have a situation where someone wants to be able to see themselves so that they can tell if they look all right. Like if you're doing an interview and you have 2 cameras, one on each person in the interview, if your interviewer wants to be able to see themselves so they can check that they're sitting up straight and their posture is right and those kinds of things, you could use an aux output to a TV in front of them so that they can just glance off to the side and say, oh, I look fine, and then move on. I sort of have that from just looking at my program feed since I'm only using one camera. But if you had two people, you wouldn't be able to show them both of those just using a program output. You would need aux outs. So that's your auxes, and we do care about those. You should know how many endpoints that are unique you need to control before you get to the internet. Remember, the internet side of things, the live streaming side of things, we don't care as much about, at least not today. The next thing you might hear about is Luma or chroma keys. This is how we make the background go away. If you've ever seen like a newscast where the person is sitting in this really fancy, like techie looking background, or the weather people where they're in front of a green screen, but then the map appears behind them, those kinds of things, those are keys. A Luma key uses luminosity, how bright or dark is something, to decide what to show you. So if I were in front of an all black background, I could use a Luma key and say, take out just the stuff that's black, and then I can put a picture behind me. And as long as I am, like you can see my shirt is red, my glasses might be a little too dark. But in that circumstance, it would get rid of all the dark stuff. Or I could go the other extreme and say, hey, take out everything that is bright white, and it would get rid of those things. A chroma key looks at colors, the chromatic side of the equation. So that's where if I'm sitting in front of something green, as long as I'm not wearing any green, a chroma key says get rid of all the green stuff and let me show a picture behind there. And that's a way that you could do that. For example, this has, you can see the like green moving background stuff behind here. Here, I'll even turn off my display for just a second. Bam, see all that? That like motion graphic thing? That's the kind of thing you could put behind a chroma key or a Luma key. So that's what those would be used for. Not super duper important unless you really want that. We've talked about building sets yesterday. If you look at that and you're like, nope, then you could always have someone design a graphic for you that can be your set and then sit in front of a green screen and just chroma key it out. And that's sort of a way to cheat yourself into a fancy looking setup without having to really do any setup. They will talk about the audio inputs, and you'll see stuff like 3.5 millimeters and TRRS and TRS and XLR. If it has audio inputs, I would just look at the picture and see if your microphone's going to fit. I could go deeper into all those, but yesterday we actually talked pretty in depth about microphones and the different lavs and smartphone options and things like that. So you can always go watch that to learn about the details. But basically, you want a switcher that has an audio input because you don't want to have to rely on your camera. But if the switcher doesn't have any audio inputs and your camera does, you can still plug a microphone into your camera, and then that works fine. So if there's not an external mic jack on the switcher, that doesn't mean it won't take a microphone. It just means it will only get audio from the cameras. So you need to make sure you can tell the camera to use a microphone. And the last term that you may or may not see is upstream and downstream. And this is usually related to keys, like your chroma keys, or there are some keys that are overlays. A key is just I'm doing something that's not a video. So if I want to show a little animation or a name card that pops up and says, this is Josh, he's incredible, those kinds of things, that would be a key. Upstream and downstream refers to whether the key is applied before or after your control of which video we see. That was a really complicated way to say that. Let me try and think of another one. When I am switching, if I have 3 different cameras and I'm switching between them, and I have a key that is an overlay of my name, if I use an upstream key, then I can show it on camera 1, but when I cut to camera 2, the overlay goes away, because it was upstream of where I made my switching decisions. If I use a downstream key, then when I show that title, it pops up over camera 1, and when I cut to camera 2, the title stays, because it's after the switching decisions are made. So that's what upstream and downstream keys mean, and they could be relevant for that exact case, like a name card, or if you want to overlay lyrics as a church, then you want to make sure you have downstream keys available so that you can switch camera angles without losing your lyrics, and things like that. So those are the terms. I'm going to reread them all to you and then remind you which ones we do and don't care about. So we talked about 3G, 6G, and 12G SDI. We don't care. We've talked about Genlock. We don't care. We've talked about SMPTE timecode, SMPTE. We don't care. We talked about the amount of rack units, RU, spaces that a device might take up. We don't care unless you're installing it into like a building permanently, then you care. We've talked about how many program outs and aux outs the device has. We don't care unless you need multiples of them. You should know how many endpoints are going to be in your building or in your space that need to be controlled, but otherwise, you don't care because this is mostly for live streaming, and that gets handled by our distribution platforms. We talked about Luma and Chroma keys. We usually don't care. If you don't want to build a set, then you want to make sure there's a Chroma key. We talked about audio inputs. We don't care. We can get around this with our cameras. And lastly, we talked about upstream and downstream keys. Really, we don't care. So what do we care about? I've just told you all of the marketing words and then said we don't care about them. We care about resolution. We want to make sure it can be full HD or 1080p, just like with our software switchers. We care about, sorry, I have these written in my notes, but I accidentally scrolled, so it's gone now. We care about whether it does or does not have at least one program out. And we care about the user experience. Blackmagic design switchers are the ones I recommend because they're the easiest to learn how to use. That doesn't mean you have to use them. Roland has a bunch of switchers, NewTek has a bunch of switchers, and there are several other not as well-established or well-known brands. But the Blackmagic design brand family, in my experience, is the best one to teach people on, and they have the best support. That's it. So don't let the other marketing words scare you. Don't let all the tech jargon get in the way of what you're trying to do. You care about reaching your tribe and mobilizing them. To do that, all we need is a switcher that can output in a resolution they want to see, 1080p or full HD, and a switcher that will do that with a program feed so that we can cut everything together. Beyond that, we don't really care. Hopefully that has simplified a lot of the pieces for you. If there are questions, I will gladly take them now. Let me check my comments here. And if there aren't questions, then I'm going to say goodbye and head out of here. But I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to post any questions just in case. I see we've got 2 viewers live today, which is pretty exciting. I think yesterday we had 1, so the numbers are growing. But if you're not here live, don't get down on yourself. I'm not upset at you for missing this. It's just, an hour of the greatest advice I could possibly offer. But, it's not a big deal that you weren't here. Doesn't look like a whole lot of questions are trickling in here, but I'm going to give it a little bit longer just to make sure. And then we will head out of here. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about encoders. And if we want to get that overview of the system again, our inputs feed into our switcher, which creates a program feed or a broadcast feed. We give that to our encoder to send to the internet. So tomorrow we're going to get into some of the technical settings and the internet words and networking talk and all that kind of stuff, how to make sure your home internet can handle the live streaming that you want to do, and how to have the argument with your internet company if it can't, and all those kinds of things. So stay tuned, get excited for that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for investing in what you do. If you are a cause-based organization like a nonprofit, there has never been a time the world has needed you more than right now. So I appreciate you. If you've learned something, let me know. Drop a comment. Let me know this was valuable. And I will see you, just like last time. I'll see you next time.